A 7-year-old boy walked into a crowded biker bar on a Friday night. His small hands clutched 7 crumpled dollar bills, his face pale and bruised, his arms covered in fresh marks from a beating. The chatter, the laughter, the clinking of pool balls. Everything stopped. He stood frozen at the center of the room, staring up at a wall of leather-clad men who could make even the toughest criminals hesitate. Then his trembling voice carried through the silence. "Will you kill my stepdad for me?" That one sentence cut through the noise like a blade, and suddenly no one moved, no one breathed. And before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The room remained still. No glasses clinked, no whispers spread. Every biker in the Iron Horse Bar had heard the words but struggled to process them. Jack Morgan, the president of the motorcycle club, was the first to break through the stunned silence. His leather vest bore the scars of thousands of miles, and his reputation was carved into every man's respect. Slowly, he knelt down until he was eye level with the boy. "What's your name, son?" Jack asked in a steady but gentle tone. The child's lips quivered. "Ethan," he whispered. Jack studied him, saw the swelling on his cheek, the fear in his eyes, the way his tiny shoulders shook with every breath. He asked again, quieter this time, "Ethan, who did this to you?" And Ethan's reply came in broken pieces. "My stepdad, Mark. He beats me and my mom when he drinks. Tonight was bad, really bad." Those words ignited something in the room. Tommy "Tank" Harris slammed his fists onto the table, his knuckles white with rage. David "Snake" Lawson pulled a knife from his pocket and rolled it between his fingers like a habit he had practiced too many times. Ray "Razor" Delgado muttered curses under his breath, his jaw clenched so hard the veins in his neck swelled. Jack's tone sharpened, colder now. "Where does this Mark live?" Ethan swallowed hard, glancing at the floor. "The blue trailer at the end of Maple Road, 2 miles from here." A low growl of recognition rippled through the bikers. Maple Road was notorious, a place filled with meth houses, gunfire, and police reports that were never followed up. Even law enforcement stayed away unless they were backed up. Tank stood quickly, slamming his beer bottle down. "Then let's go handle this right now." But Jack raised his hand, stopping him. Jack rose to his full height and faced his men. "This boy walked 2 miles in the dark, holding $7, because he thought we were killers for hire. That means he has nothing left, no hope, no one to turn to." The bikers looked at one another, their rage barely contained. Razor spat onto the floor. "Cops won't do a damn thing until it's too late." Snake's lips curled into a grin. "Then we deal with it our way." Ethan's eyes darted around, trying to make sense of these men, whether they were saviors or devils. Jack made a decision. "Call Doc." From the back of the bar, Paul "Doc" Simmons stepped forward. Once a paramedic, now a biker, Doc crouched beside Ethan and gently felt along his ribs. His expression turned grim. Broken ribs might be internal bleeding. A roar of anger erupted, chairs shoved back, fists slammed tables, voices rose in fury. Ethan's small voice broke through the chaos. "Please, help my mom. He said tonight he's going to kill her." The room went silent again, every eye on the child. Then the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, moving fast toward Maple Road. Jack's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his face hardened like stone. "There's been a shooting at the trailer park." Ethan's knees buckled, and he collapsed in despair. No, my mom." Jack's roar shook the bar, rattling glasses on the shelves. "Everyone rides now!" In seconds, engines roared to life, leather jackets flew, and 15 motorcycles thundered into the night, ignoring every law between the bar and Maple Road. Their mission was clear, and time was running out. Ethan clung tightly to Jack Morgan's leather vest as the motorcycles roared like thunder down the dark highway. his small arms wrapped around the hardened biker, every bump in the road jolting through his bruised ribs. Behind them, the line of headlights stretched like an army on wheels, engines howling, exhaust flames cracking against the night sky. The boy's hair whipped in the wind, his eyes watering from the cold rush of air. But he didn't dare let go. Jack could feel the child trembling against his back, each shiver reminding him that this wasn't just another ride. This was a rescue mission. As the pack tore onto Maple Road, the night sky flashed red and blue. Police cruisers lined the gravel shoulders, their light bars spinning shadows across broken fences and dented mailboxes. Ambulances idled, medics moved fast with gurneys, and neighbors peeked nervously from their doors as the rumble of 15 motorcycles cut through the chaos. Jack swung his bike to a stop, gravel spraying beneath his tires. He dismounted in one fluid motion, lifting Ethan gently to the ground before striding forward. "Sheriff Miller." Jack's voice boomed over the engines. The county sheriff, a weary man with deep lines carved into his 50-year-old face, stepped out from behind the cruisers. His hand rested instinctively near his holster. "Jack, you and your boys can't be here," he warned. Jack squared his shoulders, towering in his cut, his voice low but deadly certain. "The boy's mother is in that park. I'm not leaving without knowing if she's alive." The sheriff's eyes softened briefly. "She's alive," he said quickly. "But her husband isn't." A stunned silence rippled through the bikers. Their gazes shifted to the ambulance at the edge of the lot, where paramedics were loading Mark onto a stretcher. His arm and shirt were soaked with blood, his wrists cuffed to the rails, his face twisted with pain and rage as he cursed at anyone who came near. Jack's eyes burned as they tracked the boy's stepfather, but Ethan's voice broke through before he could speak. "Mom!" he cried out, his small legs kicking up gravel as he bolted forward. Sarah sat slumped in the back of a patrol car, her face swollen, bruises running along her cheek and jaw. Her eyes were red and glassy, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the tissue they had given her. A social worker in a dark blazer intercepted Ethan, kneeling to block his path. "Ethan has to come with us," she said firmly. "Child Services is taking custody immediately." Sarah's desperate cry cut through the night. "No, please, please don't take my son from me." Ethan's arms flailed toward her, but the worker's hand tightened on his shoulder, pulling him back. His face twisted in panic, his tiny fists beating against her sleeve. That was when Jack Morgan stepped forward, his boots pounding the gravel as he planted himself between Ethan and the worker. His leather vest towered over her small frame, his shadow swallowing her under the flashing lights. "Back off," Jack growled, his voice more command than request. The worker straightened, adjusting her glasses, her tone sharp. "Sir, I'll have you arrested for interference if you don't step aside." Jack's eyes narrowed, unblinking. "Try it," he said coldly. At that cue, 15 bikers shifted into position without a word, forming a wall of leather and steel around Ethan. The air thickened. Deputies instinctively reached for their holsters, tension crackling between the uniforms and the outlaws. For a moment, it seemed like Maple Road might erupt into a different kind of war. Sheriff Miller raised both hands high, his voice cutting through the standoff. "Everyone calm down. Nobody's dying tonight, not if I can stop it. Jack, let me make some calls." His words slowed the storm, though every muscle in the biker's body still coiled like springs. Minutes dragged until the sound of new headlights approached. A sedan pulled in, dust swirling as it came to a stop. A woman stepped out in hospital scrubs, her hair tied back neatly. She spoke firmly, but calmly. "Emily Morgan," she said, showing her badge. "I'm a registered nurse and a certified foster parent. I'll take custody of Ethan tonight." The social worker froze. "That's highly irregular," she argued. Emily calmly handed her documents across. "It's legal. Check the paperwork. The boy stays with me until this case is reviewed." Grumbling, the worker flipped through the papers, finally handing them back with tight lips. "Fine, but this is temporary." Ethan looked at Emily's outstretched hand. then glanced back at his mother. Sarah pressed her forehead against the glass, sobbing, her voice muffled by the cruiser window. Ethan clung to Emily's fingers, but his wide eyes never left Sarah. Jack stood close enough to see both of them, his jaw clenched, his chest heaving as if he carried their weight. That night, as the bikers escorted Emily and Ethan safely away from Maple Road, a vow passed silently between them. No one, not Mark, not the system, not anyone, would ever lay a hand on Ethan or Sarah again. Frank Dawson sat on his porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath his chair, his hands trembling as he stared at the pistol resting on the table. The night air was cool, but sweat ran down his weathered face. Jack Morgan approached quietly, boots crunching the gravel, his presence carrying a calm strength. "Frank," Jack said, his voice steady, "you saved her life tonight." Frank's eyes glistened, his voice breaking. Couldn't let him kill her in front of that boy. But now. He swallowed hard, his shoulders sagging. "I'll probably go to prison. I can't afford a lawyer." Jack reached into his vest, pulled out a worn business card and placed it firmly in Frank's hand. "You can now. Tell them the Iron Horse Brotherhood is paying." Frank's chest rose sharply, his lip trembling as tears blurred his vision. For the first time in years, the old veteran didn't feel like he was fighting the world alone. Meanwhile, Sarah was released from the patrol car after hours of questioning. Rumors had swirled through the neighborhood that she had stabbed Mark, but the truth came out. She had only grabbed a knife in desperation, trying to protect herself and Ethan. The sheriff had seen enough women in that park to know the difference between survival and crime. Still, Sarah faced a cruel reality. She had no house. The trailer was under police tape. No savings, no food, no safety net. When she broke down, covering her face with shaking hands, the bikers stepped in. Razor pulled his leather wallet. Tank emptied his pockets. Snake added a roll of cash without a word. The hat was passed from hand to hand, rough palms dropping bills until it overflowed. In less than 5 minutes, they had raised over $500, enough for a motel room, food for Ethan, and a chance to breathe. For a woman who had lived years in fear, it was more than charity. It was hope. But hope proved fragile. Word came back from the station. Mark would be released on bail in the morning. His wound was shallow, no longer life-threatening, and prosecutors claimed there wasn't enough evidence to hold him longer. Sarah's face went pale, her lips quivering as she whispered, "He's coming back. He's going to kill us both." The bikers cursed under their breath, their fury boiling, but it was Ethan who stepped forward. His small hands pulled a cracked old phone from his pocket. His voice was soft, but the weight of it silenced every man present. "My real dad gave me this before he died. He told me to record when bad things happen." Jack leaned down, his eyes narrowing as Ethan unlocked the phone. Inside were 17 shaky videos, grainy footage of Mark raging through the trailer, fists flying, curses spilling. Footage of Sarah slammed against walls. Footage of Ethan himself, small and defenseless, enduring beatings that left marks across his body. For 6 months, the boy had hidden in corners, under beds, behind doors, pressing record whenever the nightmare returned. His secret archive was proof of everything Sarah had endured and of the pain carved into Ethan's own fragile frame. Sheriff Miller's jaw tightened as the clips played, his weathered face hardening with every blow caught on screen. When the prosecutor reviewed them, her eyes went wide. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "This changes everything." Within hours, charges were stacked against Mark like a wall too high to climb. 37 counts of child abuse, domestic violence, and assault. His bail was no longer a token amount. A judge raised it to $500,000, an impossible sum for a man like him. Mark's chances of walking out the next morning vanished in a single stroke. When the news reached the bikers, the bar erupted in cheers. Tank slammed his fist into the air. Snake laughed with relief. Razor muttered a thank you under his breath. Ethan clutched his phone tightly, tears streaming down his small face, knowing his voice had finally been heard. Sarah dropped to her knees and pulled him into her arms, whispering promises she hadn't dared to say out loud in years. For the first time in a long time, the shadows lifted. But Jack Morgan didn't smile. His eyes scanned the horizon, his instincts gnawing at him. "This isn't over," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Because men like Mark had friends, and men like Jack knew the fight wasn't just in court, it was out on the streets. The morning sun rose over the cracked pavement of the motel parking lot, but peace didn't come with it. Trouble arrived in the form of 3 cars pulling in with engines rumbling low. Out stepped Mark's brothers, men with hollow eyes, meth-scorched faces, and pistols tucked at their hips. Word had spread fast through the trailer park that Mark was behind bars, and his blood had called for loyalty. These men hadn't come to talk. They came to finish what he had started. Sarah stood in the motel doorway, clutching Ethan tightly, her knees trembling. But between her family and danger stood 15 men in leather. The Iron Horse Brotherhood was already there, boots planted firm, cuts gleaming in the morning light. They didn't yell, didn't posture. They simply existed like a wall no one could break. Jack Morgan stepped forward, eyes locked on the intruders. His voice was low, but it carried across the lot. "Try it." The brothers sneered, spitting curses under their breath, their hands twitching dangerously close to their weapons. The air tightened, every breath sharp with the weight of what could happen next. The bikers didn't flinch. Snake's hand rested casually on the hilt of his knife. Tank cracked his knuckles with a sound like gunfire. Razor shifted his stance as though he were already counting the seconds it would take to close the distance. Then Jack lifted his chin, and without another word, the Brotherhood advanced as one. Boots hit the asphalt in perfect rhythm, shoulders squared, eyes unblinking. They didn't raise a single weapon, but the sight was enough to drain the color from the brothers' faces. They backed up, muttering threats that rang hollow in the morning air. The moment cracked when they realized the truth. If they drew those pistols, they weren't leaving that lot alive. No shot was fired. Not a single blade was drawn. But that morning, 3 men who thought fear made them powerful discovered a greater terror: the iron will of 15 bikers who had chosen to protect instead of destroy. By sundown, the brothers had vanished. Some locals whispered they were buried deep in the desert sand, fed to coyotes by men who left no trail. Others swore they fled south, crossing into Mexico where no one dared look for them. But when asked, Jack Morgan only gave the same cold reply, his voice carrying a warning that echoed through town. They decided to relocate for health reasons. It was the kind of phrase that closed mouths and ended questions. What mattered was simple. Ethan and Sarah had survived another day. For the first time in years, they slept without terror gnawing at the door. Yet survival wasn't the same as living. Sarah's life lay in ruins. The trailer was gone, destroyed not by flames but by years of violence that had hollowed it to nothing. She had no job, no savings, no plan for tomorrow. Her hands, once steady enough to soothe Ethan's tears, shook whenever she tried to imagine a future. Ethan's laughter, the kind a boy his age should have known freely, came in cautious bursts, as though joy itself might be punished. That was when the Brotherhood made another decision, not as outlaws, but as men who had seen too much pain to stand aside. They didn't just ride for the road anymore. They would ride for Ethan. They would ride for Sarah. From that morning on, the vow was made and sealed without ceremony. The Iron Horse Brotherhood would make sure mother and son never walked alone again. The Iron Horse Brotherhood didn't wait for the system to catch up. By the very next week, Sarah and Ethan had a roof over their heads again. Not a trailer plagued by memories, but a small, clean apartment the club found and paid for out of their own pockets. Within days, furniture appeared, hauled in by bikers who had stripped their own garages, attics, and basements. A couch from Razor, a dining table from Doc, a twin bed for Ethan from Snake, who carried it up the stairs as if it weighed nothing. The fridge was stocked before Sarah ever set foot inside. Milk, eggs, fresh fruit, meat, things she hadn't been able to buy in months. And when Sarah stood in that kitchen, tears streaking her cheeks as she opened the refrigerator door, Emily Morgan wrapped her in a hug and whispered, "You're safe now. We'll help you stand again." Emily spent hours with Sarah filling out forms for assistance, medical care, and schooling, guiding her through the maze of paperwork no single mother should ever face alone. Across town, Frank Dawson's story took a different turn. Once labeled a criminal for protecting Sarah and Ethan, the old veteran now stood as a symbol of courage. The Brotherhood had refused to let him rot in a cell. They marched into the courthouse with the best defense attorney money could buy, paid in full by the club. Sheriff Miller himself testified to Frank's service record, his honesty, his sacrifices. The charges fell apart under the weight of truth, and Frank walked free. A week later, the city honored him at a small ceremony on the courthouse steps. The mayor pinned a medal on his chest, calling him a hero who had acted when others would have turned away. Frank's hands still shook when he spoke, but that day, he stood straighter than he had in years. For the first time since the war, he felt the world hadn't forgotten him. Ethan, meanwhile, began to rediscover something no court ruling could restore: his boyhood. The bruises on his arms faded, but the Brotherhood knew healing ran deeper than skin. Jack Morgan was the first to help, lifting Ethan onto the back of his Harley one quiet evening. "Hold on tight," Jack said, and when the engine roared to life, Ethan's laughter broke free into the wind. Tank took over next, teaching the boy how to change a tire, showing him the simple pride of fixing something with his own two hands. Snake, always the quietest of the crew, taught him how to stand his ground. Not with fists alone, but with the courage to look a man in the eye and refuse to break. Slowly, piece by piece, Ethan was rebuilt, not into a fighter, but into someone who knew he was never alone again. Every man in the Brotherhood became more than a biker in Ethan's eyes. They became uncles, protectors, teachers. They filled the empty spaces Mark had carved out of his childhood, and they swore those scars would never be reopened. Through it all, Ethan carried one small reminder of where he had come from: the 7 crumpled dollars folded in his pocket. The money he had once saved for escape was never spent, never unfolded, never forgotten. It stayed with him always, not as a symbol of desperation anymore, but as a reminder of the night everything changed, the night his cry for help was finally heard. Years passed, and the shadows of that terrible night slowly faded. Mark, the stepfather who had broken so much, eventually took a plea deal, 8 years in prison. He never again looked Ethan or Sarah in the eye. Behind bars, he was just another forgotten man, stripped of the power he once used to terrify. Sarah, though scarred, rebuilt her life from the ground up. She found steady work, leaned on Emily Morgan's guidance, and stood strong as a mother determined to never let fear define her again. With the Iron Horse Brotherhood at her side, she raised Ethan in a home filled not with fear, but with love, laughter, and safety. Frank Dawson, the veteran who pulled the trigger that saved Sarah's life, finally lived out his days with peace. No longer haunted by the label of criminal, he became an honored guest at the Iron Horse Bar. Whenever he walked in, the bikers would rise to their feet, greeting him as one of their own. For Frank, those men were the family he never thought he'd have again. And Ethan, the boy who once carried 7 crumpled dollars as his only hope, grew into a strong young man. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had been tested in fire and had come out forged, not broken. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the motorcycles lined the bar's parking lot, Jack Morgan asked him a question. "Son," Jack said, his gravelly voice softened by years of brotherhood, "why'd you keep those $7 all this time?" Ethan pulled the faded bills from his wallet, still folded, still worn. He smiled. "Because they bought me something money can't buy. They bought me an army of angels who looked like demons." Jack didn't say a word. Instead, he took those $7, framed them, and hung them on the wall of the Iron Horse Bar. They're still there to this day, and every Thursday night, when the club gathers, their eyes find that frame. They don't see paper, They see a boy's cry for help that turned them into heroes. Because sometimes, the most dangerous men make the best protectors. They understand violence and know exactly when not to use it. Ethan is grown now with children of his own, but every week he still visits Jack Morgan. Not because he needs protection anymore, but because family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is 15 dangerous bikers who chose to save you instead of becoming what you begged them to be. What do you think? Was Ethan's secret recording of Mark the real turning point that saved his life and his mom's? Or was it the Brotherhood stepping in when no one else would? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to Stories by BB for more true stories of courage, survival, and unexpected heroes.